Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fast track session for the flexible packaging for e-commerce. We're excited to have you here, and judging by the sheer number of folks joining us from around the world, it's obvious that the e-commerce channel and packaging is a hot topic. So we want to welcome everyone from Europe and Latin America and the US. Thanks for being here. So as advertised, today's session is very short, so we're just going to get to it. Once I introduce our three speakers, we're going to open a Q&A module. It'll be on the lower part of your screen there. There are experts from Mintel, Georgia Pacific, and Scholle IPN on the back end, ready to answer questions. So there's no need to wait to the end. That module is open right now, and you're welcome to use it anytime. We have a great slate of speakers for you today. David Lutenberger is the Global Packaging Director for Mintel, and in his work for Mintel, David leads one of the best group of CPG analysts around the world. And I often say that if you can find it on a retail shelf literally anywhere on planet Earth, David and his team probably already knew about it. So we thank David for being here and for his service in the US Marines. Brent Hanum is the Commercial Engineering Manager for Scholle IPN. Brent is the engineer that takes an idea and actually makes it work. And he can often be found in one of our innovation labs or elbow deep in a production line at a customer somewhere around the world. Brent is a rare person who can actually tell you if something is or isn't rocket science, having worked for NASA in a former life. And Carrie Wilson is the Senior Packaging Innovation Engineer for Georgia Pacific's Packaging Division. Carrie works from her innovation lab every day to find better ways to get products from point A to point B using corrugate. I'm sure Carrie's ready to beat up on Alabama again in college football championships this year. So go Clemson. That's it from me. Thanks again for joining us today. Again, use the Q&A chat at any point in time. And David Lutenberger is going to go ahead and get us started. So I'm going to kick it over to David.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction, and it's sure a pleasure to be here with everyone today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in e-commerce with flexibles, but I want to preface, this has been an unusual year. We're certainly looking forward to 2021, getting this year over with. We've heard so much, though, about whether it's traditional retail or online or buy online, pick up in store, about the new normal. And the way Mintel looks at it is there is nothing new about what's going on. We are always helping you look forward about what's next, because new sort of gives a connotation of static, where next is we always have to be prepared. And at Mintel, we're looking at what's happening right now. And when we say next, we mean the next 18 to 24 months. And then we look to the future. What's going to happen after, COVID is over? What entrenched behaviors on online shopping and e-commerce and packaging are going to stick with us with that halo effect? And what ones are going to kind of fade? So it's interesting, we look at how COVID has really reshaped our long-term shopping behaviors. We have totally flipped what our purchasing priorities are, as well as flipped how we are shopping. You look at some of our Mintel COVID tracker here, more of us are shopping online, and we will continue to shop online. And what we're looking for is value. We're looking for convenience. We're also looking for larger pack size. And that's where certainly flexible packaging and multi-packs, even food service packaging and flexibles can really, make a difference for consumers' lives as we move forward and we find out what's next, what's going to give us that new value proposition, what's going to give us that new element of convenience. And certainly when we look at e-commerce packaging right now, we're sort of on that fence. We want that durability because we can see that more than half of US consumers are still worried about, is an item going to be damaged in shipment? If I buy, something that's fragile and a 50-pound bag of dog food, are they both going to arrive safely? We are also seeing here at Mintel, and this is short term, that consumers right now are putting safety and hygiene over environmental responsibility, but we truly believe that's going to be a very short-term effect, that as we get back to whatever our next normal is and we begin to live our lives a little more normally, that environmental responsibility will come back into play. And that's why it's really important for retailers, brands, and package manufacturers to really look at, what are we developing that is durable to ensure safety, hygiene, and safe transportation, but also, reassures consumers that we are also environmentally responsible. When it comes to e-commerce, packaging caps, closures, when we look at flexible packaging, certainly seams and seals are very important. We want to make sure that anything that we are buying, in particular, anything in flexibles, that we're going to get our products that are uncrushed, that haven't not only leaked or spilled into themselves, but also damaged something else in that shipment that we're getting as well. So the changes that we're seeing in consumer purchasing behaviors, in mindsets, in lifestyles, certainly we're seeing that right now, a lot of the household products that we're buying, 60 some percent, nearly 2/3 of everything we buy in that household category are being purchased online. And I think that really sets up an opportunity for flexible packaging right now to really work toward what's that next true innovation, and not just a disruptive innovation, but a real solutions-based innovation, something that consumers can look at. They can see that, yes, this is different, but more importantly, that they can understand why this flexible package is different and what that difference means to me in terms of my purchasing behaviors, my lifestyle, my purchasing mindsets. So we found a couple, and honestly, I haven't seen a lot of flexible packaging, particularly flexible packaging for liquids, come into the marketplace, since the Tide Eco Box, those sorts of things. We're just not seeing a lot happen. Now, this is one that we did just find. It's a flexible pouch. It's not padded, but it is also for a powder, not for a liquid. But I even reached out to a good friend of mine, Kim Houchins, Director of Consumer Packaging at Amazon. I said, Kim, what have you got? What can you share with me today so I can share with the Scholle folks and their clients about what's that next generation of flexibles for liquids for e-commerce? And she called me back and said, hey, if you can find it, please bring it to my attention because we are not seeing it. And I really think that points to an opportunity for flexible packaging in that there's a huge white space for flexibles right now, particularly for e-commerce, to develop that next generation, something that combines durability and environmental responsibility, but is not something that's so different that the consumers don't really understand what the difference is. But that white space really involves three things: durability, environmental responsibility, and solutions for e-commerce packaging and flexibles that consumers can look at it, understand why it's different, and most importantly, understand what that difference means to their lives. So as we promised, this is going to be very quick today. I appreciate your time and attention for allowing Mintel to share some big picture thoughts. And now I'm going to ask Brent to kind of take it over from me.
Yes, good morning, everyone, or good evening, good day, probably is a better way to put that, considering our audience. Thank you, David, for all that. Very much appreciate it. My name is Brent Hanum, and I'm going to focus primarily on flexible packaging and the environment. David spoke a lot about how right now, we're kind of focused on the short term, and it's understandable given the year that we've had, right? But the long-term issues and the long-term has to be considered. So as we think about long-term, one of the interesting things to think about is population growth and what are the challenges we're going to have over the next 50 to 80 years. As you look at it, we've had significant population growth, but one of the things we're starting to come up against is our population growth is beginning to and will continue to outpace our supporting resources. So this drives us to a few crises that are going to be our next big ones: access to fresh water, access to food, fossil fuel consumption, and rising temperatures. And then as you look at rising temperatures, that exacerbates the first two in particular, of access to fresh water and access to food. So this is a large, wicked problem that no one entity can solve. But we all have a part to play in that, and packaging has a part to play. Packaging can support sustainable production, distribution, and protection of food and other items. Whenever you look at it, flexible continues to grow. There's a reason that flexible continues to grow. It works very well for certain applications. Not all applications, but many applications. There's a lot of benefits there. And many of those are sustainability driven, including total energy used, total material weight, greenhouse gas emissions in process and distribution, in particular. And then food waste. Food waste is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emission, and the amount of energy and fossil fuel that goes into making food and getting it to a consumer is significant and really surprising. So packaging has a role in all of this. Now, as we look at e-commerce in particular, I think we all kind of know this personally in what we've experienced in our lives this year. How much more do you buy things online? How much less do you go to stores? That's not true for everybody, but for many of us it is. Looking back since 2014, we've seen 10% year-over-year growth in e-commerce. This is happening in a consumer-facing environment where things are getting delivered to people's houses, but it's also happening in a business-to-business environment. That e-commerce channel for business-to-business is growing, and it will continue to. And as you look at the large players in e-commerce, it's really interesting from a financial standpoint. You look at organizations where their main profit drivers, were not related to buying an item, and getting it delivered to you, right? In many cases, those were actually loss leaders. And you're starting to see that change. And that's starting to change, one, because of demand, two, because of efficiencies, but three, because those systems are changing as well. When you look at Amazon as an example, they've introduced a per package fee for products that don't comply with frustration-free packaging and or SIOC being ships in its own container. And we'll talk a little more extensively about SIOC later in the presentation. But these things are changing. Weight is also a factor as well. So when we look at that, I think we've all kind of had this experience. You have, packages here, great packages that are, intended for a retail off-the-shelf environment and are getting moved into an e-commerce realm without necessarily the packaging changing. And the channels, the means by which we're purchasing things is changing, and the packaging really hasn't caught up with that. So what we're doing is we're using these existing, oftentimes rigid packages that work great for certain applications, but not necessarily for this channel. And then we're having to add a lot of secondary and tertiary packaging as well as touches to these products, which increases cost, but doesn't necessarily guarantee that the product's going to survive or maybe and definitely not thrive. And we need packaging that excites the consumer, doesn't frustrate them. People don't want to get 3 boxes and wads of additional protective packaging every time they buy something. So that focus may not be there today as heavily as it will be in the future. As we look at the EPA and sustainability, a lot of people maybe don't know this, but there's a reason that it's reduce, reuse, recycle. If you look at this inverted triangle, this comes from the EPA, and it's basically an order of significance of impact. And the most significant, most impactful thing you can do is source reduction, right? Use less material, use less product, use less things, right? Then you go into reuse, recycling, composting, energy recovery, and finally treatment and disposal. As you look at flexibles, the reduction side is really the strong part of that. Reducing the amount of material used to package, but also reducing damage to products. The least sustainable thing you can do is have product arrive ruined, because all the value that's been added to that is destroyed at the very end of that. That's the least sustainable thing you can do, because everything that went into that is now wasted and ruined. So as we look at that, and we look at some of these new standards that we're talking about, overall, there's Compact by Design is coming online now. And if you don't know, many of you probably know what Compact by Design is, but if you don't, Compact by Design is identifying products that have a more efficient design. And this plays twofold. One, it supports profitability for distributors and sellers. But two, it has significant environmental impacts by reducing weight, by concentrating products and shipping less water, having less packaging or efficient shapes, so that way you ship less air overall. And we look at flexible packaging, this really hits many of these areas. Less weight as compared to rigids. Concentrated products are oftentimes shipped in flexible packaging, and many times it's a preferential way to do so. something that we do extensively. As you look at less packaging, you know, flexibles are known well for limited air in the package before fill, and then as well as after fill, you're really cubing things out quite well. So as you look at that, what does that equate to? That equates to product to package ratios. So here's a couple of comparisons of a bag-in-box versus a rigid in different arenas. The first one is in motor oil. So you look at 6 1-quart HTP bottles versus a 6-quart bag-in-box. You have a significant package weight reduction. You have a significant improvement in product to package ratio. And those things manifest themselves in reduced greenhouse gases through transportation, reduced emissions, as well as reduced material weight in the initial packaging. So again, reduction, 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 harping on that most important piece of the sustainability triangle. Similar issues with when you look at glass bottles, more significant product to package ratio improvements. And then lastly, even in pails. Last thing I would want to comment on is when you look at a SIOC approved bag-in-box, what does that look like when it arrives at a DC? On the left, you can see a pallet, a cubed out pallet. Almost the entirety of that pallet is product. If those are SIOC approved BIB cases, what a picker does is they grab a case and they throw it on a line. That line slaps a label on it and it gets shipped. You have limited handling. This is the desirable position for most distribution facilities and most e-commerce companies. And if you can win in that system and be preferential for them, you come to the top of the search results. And that's really what we want to help you do. As that's it for me. I appreciate your time. I'm going to kick it over to Carrie Wilson with GP. Thank you again.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brent. So Brent talked a lot about the network and the distribution. So what I'm going to really focus on is how the boxes perform in the e-commerce environment and some of the development projects that we've done in order to make sure that they perform and get to the final destination. I'm also going to touch a little bit deeper on the SIOC testing. So at GP, we have multiple testing capabilities. We have a paper science lab. This lab tests the fibers and the structures of the paper itself. We employ a lot of different techniques to make sure that we're providing the strongest paper combination to our customers. We also have conditioning chambers where we are able to condition packages from everything from refrigerated all the way to freezing conditions so that we can simulate what the package is actually going to withstand in a real testing environment. We also have materials testing lab where we're looking at paper as well as finished board combinations. And we're just really making sure that those packages are in specification and that the papers meet specifications both internally and externally for our customers. Today, we're really going to focus on the transportation testing lab, which is really about how the product performs both the box and the pallet load in the transportation distribution environment. So basically about 2 years ago, we partnered with Scholle to develop a bag-in-box solution to really solve that market need for shipping liquids in the e-commerce environment and that can pass that SIOC Amazon protocol, which I'll go into a little bit later. But as you can see on this slide, this is what a bag-in-box that is not designed for e-commerce, once it's shipped, that's what it looks like. So we really saw this need. We have an Amazon APAS certified lab here. We're also ISTA certified. So knowing that, we thought we were really uniquely qualified to be able to develop solutions for this. We also tested all the solutions that we developed, not only to pass the SIOC protocol, but then we actually put log trackers on them and shipped them around the country via air as well as ground shipments, just to make sure, as a final check, to make sure that everything that we developed would actually work in the real world environment. So the ISTA 6 Amazon testing protocol, what that consists of really is an 8-drop sequence followed by a 2.5-hour vibration. That first part of it, 2 hours of that basically incorporate with the top load. The last 30 minutes, the top load is removed and the vibration sequence is changed. For our testing, we could get this far. We had no problem developing packages, but then that last drop sequence, those 9 drops, especially that last 36, that's what really hung us up. So we spent a lot of time developing to be able to pass those final 9 drops. And really the difference in this protocol versus other protocols is that there is an increased number of drops. The drop height is increased. And really the biggest hang up for us is something called the teardrop effect. So basically what happens when a liquid is falling, it forms into a teardrop. And that's exactly what is happening in free fall when these packages are falling and they want to form that teardrop shape and want to bulge out. So our designers spent a lot of time developing new designs and putting in different techniques that would allow us to protect against that bulge and allow us to get through the entire drop sequence without any bulging, without any torn perfs, any ends popping open. And if you can imagine 6 gallons is extremely heavy. So that's about 50 pounds of water falling at 36 inches. So it's a pretty stringent protocol. So the designs that we developed, so the first one, it's designed for really 2 to 7 liters. It's a tap design. You can put the tap either on the front of the package or on the sides of the long or the short panel. It's a very simple design, but it allows for dispensing, and you can just slap a label on it and ship it to the consumer. They just need to open up the perf panel, pull the tap through, put it into the locking feature, and they are ready to go. The next design is for a pour spout. This one comes, it looks like an RSC, but really it's a telescoping case. So as it comes to the customer, basically there's tape on the bottom. They would remove that tape, take the top cap off, pull down the perf panel that is easy to tear. Then they would put the pour spout through, lock it in place, and then on the backside there's a handle to provide easy pouring. And this design in and of itself, we actually could go heavier, but pouring more than 7 liters is a little bit challenging. So we kind of capped it there, but if you want 8, we could do 8 as well. Our final design, this was our most challenging one, and this one really took that teardrop effect into place. So as we talked about earlier, this is for 3 to 6 gallons. We basically employed a technique here where we used a rollover. This technique was developed for bulk bins and to prevent bulging in bulk bins. If you could think of huge, 2,000-pound bulk bins with resin pellets, and it's very, very heavy and wants to bulge. So we developed this rollover design, which basically puts almost 4 layers of cord. So we have a double wall box. It turns it into almost 4 walls on the very top piece of it. And what that does is it gives you kind of hoop strength, and it provides that bulge resistance that we needed in order to survive those drops. And this one is very simple to use. It's just taped at the bottom. You just punch in the perf, take the tap out, lock it in place, and then just flip it over, and you are ready to use it. Our designers put a lot of work into this one, and we are really proud of this design, that the 50 to 60 pound of liquid can ship through e-commerce without being damaged. With that, I'm going to close out my presentation and pass it back to Ryan in order to close us out.
All right, everyone, I want to thank everybody for your time. I want to thank our speakers, David, Carrie, and Brent. Again, our QA chat is open. Feel free to pop in there. We'll have experts from all 3 companies in there ready and waiting to answer your questions. And at this time of year, of course, happy holidays, and hope everyone is safe and has a good new year.